Hi, I'm Rek Kwawer, and I'm from NASCO, and today we're going to be talking about conflict of interest and what a conflict of interest is. So you've probably heard people expressing concerns about conflicts of interest, but what does that actually mean? In cooperatives, we all have a stake in the outcome of most of the decisions, so how can we get anything done without running into conflicts of interest? A key part of this has to do with acting in good faith, something we strive for in our co-ops, and the duty of loyalty that board members have to the organization and its interests. You can learn more about this duty and other board member responsibilities in some of our other presentations. A conflict of interest exists when a person either benefits or is perceived to benefit materially from a potential outcome of a decision. When a conflict of interest is disclosed, the cooperative can take that information into account when making a decision. But when someone fails to disclose a potential conflict of interest, the group doesn't have the information needed for a well-considered decision. There are several different categories of conflict of interest. Some of those broad categories are self-dealing, where a director may materially benefit from a decision made by the co-op; nepotism, where the director has a family member, close friend, or partner who might benefit from a decision; or outside interests, where the director has a role outside the board which is in conflict with their role on the board. All of these apply just as much to your house decisions as to the board decisions. There are some common misconceptions about conflict of interest. A conflict of interest does not exist simply because someone cares passionately about an issue, or when someone is refusing to consider alternatives to a proposal, or when someone is involved with other organizations or businesses besides the cooperative. Some examples that you may have run into in a co-op regarding conflict of interest are voting on any censure you might get under the co-op's lease or policies. For example, fines, evictions, or member reviews. Voting on any benefit you might get, which would not be received by others, under the co-op's lease or policies. For example, discounted fees, reduced work hours, or paid employment, whether it's permanent or contracted. Or voting for the co-op not to proceed with a project so that another organization you are part of can do that project. There are also some things that people sometimes get concerned about that are not actually conflicts of interest. For example, voting on the co-op's budget, even though it affects you in a material way. This is because everyone's conflict of interest in voting on a co-op budget is exactly matched by every other person. Everyone has the same benefit from that. Another example is being hired by the cooperative when you're providing a competitive rate and have recused yourself from a vote. Another example would be having strong opinions about an issue that impacts you as a co-op member. Having strong opinions is totally fine. When someone feels a sense of loyalty to one party or another involved in a decision, it can help to talk about this as divided loyalty rather than as conflict of interest. It's still a major issue for the co-op to address, but it's not the same as a conflict of interest. And finally, an example of what's not a conflict of interest would be voting on something that materially benefits you after disclosing this to the board, when you can demonstrate that you're making your vote for the good of the organization rather than for your own personal benefit. What can we do about conflicts of interest? As organizations, whether we're incorporated as cooperatives or as nonprofits, it's important to avoid the appearance of conflicts of interest. The best way to do this is to have a clear policy requiring the board or committee members disclose any potential conflicts of interest they may have. If a conflict of interest does exist, they may also abstain from voting on the decision in question. Why disclosure? By disclosing a potential conflict of interest, you're bringing it to the awareness of the entire decision-making body, meaning that they can take your potential conflict of interest into account when they consider your opinion. It creates an environment of openness and transparency. How to disclose? There are several ways a co-op can have people disclose potential conflicts of interest. Some co-ops have a board code of ethics that includes an agreement to disclose conflicts of interest, and even to refrain from voting in those situations. Some co-ops have board members sign a document that indicates any outside commitments that might become conflicts of interest, such as outside employment. Some co-ops have a chance at the beginning of every board meeting where anyone can disclose a potential conflict of interest. The generally accepted best practice for disclosing conflicts of interest is to have regular times when members are expected to disclose any potential conflicts of interest to others. This can be at the beginning of a meeting, it can be in writing, but to have a regular time when everyone is expected to disclose anything that could become a conflict of interest. Can people still be on the board if they have a conflict of interest? The answer is yes. The most important part of this presentation is that it's important for people to identify when they may have a conflict of interest, disclose that to the rest of the board, and refrain from voting in a way that creates a conflict of interest. Most of our co-ops want board members who are actively involved with the community, or to want to provide employment to co-op members. These are great things and they build strong organizations. The issue isn't having a potential conflict of interest, it's how you handle it. Now that we've talked more about what a conflict of interest is and how to disclose those, you might want to learn more by checking out our presentation with some case studies about potential conflicts of interest and how co-ops can handle those. Thanks for listening.